In February of 2008, a 24-year-old real estate agent walked into a vacant luxury home on a quiet cul-de-sac in Saanich, British Columbia, and never walked out. Lindsay Buziak was stabbed to death during what should have been a routine house showing carried out in broad daylight in a neighborhood where violent crime was almost unheard of. Nearly 2 decades later, no one has been charged. The people who lured her there were seen, spoken to, and then vanished, leaving behind no names, no arrests, and far more questions than answers. What makes this case so unsettling isn't just the brutality of the crime, it's what happened around it. The phone calls that felt off, but not enough to cancel the appointment. The warnings that were raised and somehow ignored. The evidence that exists, but remains sealed, redacted, or unexplained. And now, so many years later, Lindsay's family has been told that the active investigation into her murder is winding down. Detectives reassigned, the search for answers quietly fading away. This isn't just the story of a murder that is still unsolved, it's the story of how a meticulously planned crime can hide in plain sight. But this story isn't finished. By carefully examining what we know, questioning what doesn't add up, and bringing overlooked details back into the light, there's still a chance that together we can uncover answers that have remained hidden for nearly 20 years. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another true crime deep dive. So as many of you know, if you've been following me on social media, or if you saw my community post, I have been very, very ill throughout the Christmas and New Year's holidays, and I'm starting to feel better this week, so now I'm filming. But yeah, if my voice gives out or I sound weird, that's probably it. Now today we're talking about Lindsay Buziak. Highly requested case. Before we get into the details, I want to take a moment to tell you why this case matters to me, why it stayed with me for so many years, and why I felt like I needed to come back to it now. I first heard about Lindsay Buziak's case in 2016 when the podcast Case File covered her murder. And like a lot of cases I've covered over the years, it was disturbing, but this one didn't fade. It never sat right with me. Lindsay was only 24 years old. She was just starting her career, just building her life, and her murder wasn't really impulsive or chaotic. It seemed to be carefully planned. It was organized. She was clearly the target, but there was no robbery. There was no sexual assault. Someone went to deliberate lengths to get Lindsay alone in a specific place at a specific time, and the motive seemed to just be brutally taking her life. That's it. And I kept coming back to the same question. Why? What could a 24-year-old real estate agent who didn't seem to have any enemies possibly have done to provoke something like this? What motive justifies that level of violence, especially when it appears to have been carried out by more than one person with coordination and foresight? Those questions have never stopped bothering me. And over the years, as more theories circulated and more speculation took hold, I felt like the actual truth was getting buried, either oversimplified, sensationalized, distorted. And then in November of 2025, Lindsay's mother, Evelyn, posted this on YouTube.
My precious daughter, Lindsay Buziak, should be here today on November 2nd, celebrating her 42nd birthday with family and friends. Instead, it's another day of sadness without her. February 2nd will mark the 18th year of her horrific murder. Another year without closure, without knowing who or why. Another year that those responsible walk free. I was recently informed that the active investigation had come to an end and that the detectives assigned to the investigation were being transferred to other departments. It was a decision based on resources. The news has been devastating. Even though the years passed without answers, at least with it being an active investigation, I had hope that one day justice would be served. I'm frustrated and desperately seeking answers. I don't know where else to turn. I'm hoping by creating this video, my message will reach people who can help. Police have told me that there are people who could provide the evidence necessary to convict those responsible, but they are afraid or reluctant to become involved. I'm directing my plea at you,
Okay, according to Lindsay's mother, she was told that the active investigation into Lindsay's murder had come to an end. The detectives were being reassigned. And when I heard this, I was actually excited because a huge stopping point in this case has been the fact that law enforcement has been so protective of the details, the evidence, the police files, etc. Now, in the United States, the phrase, the investigation is no longer active, often signals a real opportunity to possibly obtain files that had been kept away from the public previously. You can use FOIA. But then as I looked into it more, I found that the police in Saanich, they followed Evelyn's statement up with one of their own. According to Inspector Detective Drew Robertson, the investigation remains active and ongoing. He said, quote, in prolonged investigations, it is standard practice for investigators to be periodically reassigned. These reassignments are part of routine operational adjustments and do not reflect any change in the status or priority of a case, end quote, which to me, that last sentence is contradictory because if you're taking detectives off a case, it certainly signals that the case is lowered in priority, right? However, I believe when law enforcement does this, it's specifically to continue guarding the files so that the public cannot access them. So while you don't have anyone actively working on the case, you also at the same time claim it's still open. And then we all continue to live in some sort of limbo purgatory where nothing is happening, no progress is being made, but the case is open, so the records can't be released because that might compromise the integrity of a case that the police have been unable to solve for almost 2 decades. Makes sense, right? However, there has been some success in unsealing a portion of the Lindsay Buziak case files. In 2019, a Canadian news outlet called Capital Daily began a formal court battle in the British Columbia Supreme Court to unseal judicial orders and police records that had been sealed since the early days of this investigation. Nearly a year later, in September 2020, the court allowed dozens of those documents to be released, and in October 2020, Capital Daily published previously unseen details from the investigation, and this gave the public a rare look behind the courtroom seals that had kept much of this case hidden for more than a decade. This gave us some new information, which I found to be very interesting, but the files were still heavily redacted. So after seeing Lindsay's mother's video and her plea for someone to come forward, I decided it was finally time to bring this highly requested case to all of you. And I had no idea what I was getting into, how many threads I would pull that would lead me to places I hadn't anticipated. I started digging, not just reading headlines or rehashing what already was out there, but talking to people, confirming details, comparing accounts, and really getting into the thick of this case because it matters to me to understand what actually happened to Lindsay Buziak, not just as a victim of an unsolved crime, but as a real person whose life was cut short in a way that still does not make sense. And that's what this series is about, slowing down, looking carefully, questioning what doesn't add up, and seeing whether together we can bring some clarity to a case that has haunted so many people for nearly 20 years. This case will be in multiple parts, but I do encourage you to stick through it with me because you may think you know this case, but that's what I thought too. I will not give you more than 3 parts, and I might be able to even fit everything into 2. That's the hope, but we have a lot to talk about today. Before we dive in, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video. Before we get into today's video, I want to thank Helix Sleep for sponsoring today's episode, and honestly, this one makes sense for me because sleep is not optional in my life anymore. It's a survival tool. I used to think I was fine on whatever mattress I had until I actually slept on one that was made for me. And once that happens, once you see the difference and you realize you've been lying to yourself for years, you just can't go back. And I've had my Helix mattress. It's the Midnight Luxe mattress. I've had it since 2020. Maybe even before that, actually. Yeah, it was before that because it was before I moved into my new house and I made sure to take my Helix sleep mattress with me. So maybe even 2019 or 2018. But here's the thing. You spend about a third of your life in bed. So why are we out here acting like the mattress doesn't matter? No, you have to make sure that your mattress is good for you. And what I love about Helix is that they don't do the whole one size fits all thing. You take their Helix sleep quiz. It's really quick, really easy. And it asks about how you sleep. Do you sleep on your side, your back, your stomach? Do you run hot or cold when you sleep? Do you wake up sore? All of that. And then it matches you with the mattress that actually fits your body and your sleep style. And that's how I found mine, the Midnight Luxe. and it was immediately a massive upgrade from what I had before. I sleep deeper. I don't toss and turn, so I'm not waking up constantly all night. And I don't get that, why does my back feel like I fought for my life overnight feeling anymore? I'm really sleeping soundly. The mattress just like nestles me. Everyone in my house has a Helix sleep mattress. My daughter Bella, who just turned 9, she has the Helix Kids mattress, which I love because the mattress grows with your kid. Basically, you can flip it over as they age, which will make it more firm or soft based on their age. She loves it, and I love it too because I'm always having to fall asleep with her in that bed. So it works for me too. And I also really appreciate how easy the whole process was because once you take the quiz, once you're matched with your mattress, Helix is going to ship that mattress straight to your door, and there's free shipping in the United States, and setup is simple. It's easy. If I say something is easy, you know it is because nothing is easy for me. There's no complicated nonsense, no stress, and I didn't have to go to a mattress store and lay on a bunch of different beds that other people have laid on while a mattress salesperson hovers over me. Well, Helix gives you a chance to actually try your mattress in your own home because they have a 120-night sleep trial. So the mattress gets delivered to you, set it up, and you can actually live on that mattress and sleep on that mattress for quite a while. And then you can decide if it's right for you, instead of just having to pick something at the store and hoping it's right for you once you get it home. I am spending a lot more time in bed. I'm getting in bed a lot earlier and just kind of lounging, watching movies, reading. The more you spend time in a bed, the more you'll see if it's really good for you or if it's really bad for you. And Helix is also one of the most awarded mattress brands, with the Helix Midnight Luxe, my bed, being ranked best overall mattress by outlets like Forbes and Wired. So it's not just me saying this. And if you're not ready to make a leap into a new mattress yet, and you kind of want to, extend the life of your old mattress, Helix also has amazing mattress toppers. So you can kind of avoid the commitment of going with the whole new mattress. You can let your old bed ride it out for a little bit longer, and you can even personalize your mattress topper. So they have the premium mattress topper, which is a combination of coils and memory foam. They have a memory foam mattress topper. They have an Erga Align mattress topper to optimize spinal alignment, and they even have a dual zone memory topper if you sleep with a partner, so you can kind of personalize it to what each person needs. It's great, so check that stuff out. Thank you again to Helix Sleep for sponsoring today's video, and if you want to check them out, head over to helixsleep.com/Harlowe and take advantage of their flash sale exclusive partner offer of 27% off site-wide, which is a great deal. So not only your mattresses, your mattress toppers, but Helix has amazing pillows as well. Once again, that's helixsleep.com/Harlowe to get 27% off site-wide. I will put the link and the code in the description box and pinned comment. Check it out. Thank you so much to Helix Sleep. Let's dive in. All right, first things first, I want to shout out the sources that have been invaluable during the process of researching Lindsay's case. Obviously, Capital Daily, who have not only published articles, but also put together a really comprehensive podcast called Murder on the Island, led by journalist Xander Sherman. Also, huge shout out to the blog Murder on D'Souza, whose writer I've been in contact with and who has provided a wealth of information throughout dozens and dozens of posts and has been really great answering my questions, even about the tiniest things. I've been texting them throughout the day, sending emails, just really, really great information source. I also want to thank Lindsay's father, Jeff Buziak, who has openly talked with me about everything and who has been the loudest voice in finding justice for Lindsay since day one, and all the other people that I've contacted throughout this process to help me verify information, dates, times, etc. Some of them did not want to be named, others didn't mind. I will shout them out as we go along. Of course, we also have newspapers.com, which allowed me to see the early coverage of Lindsay's murder so that I could compare and contrast different details that came out as the years went on. As I said, I did listen to Case Files coverage of this case, and there was a Dateline episode as well, but evidently there are some issues with the reporting coming from these sources, so we'll use them as much as we can while understanding that everything included may not be totally accurate, unless it's actually coming from the mouth of somebody interviewed in that Dateline episode, right? For instance, if we're hearing it from a detective, I'm going to take it as accurate. Now, as always, to understand what happened at the end, we have to go back to the beginning, and we need to go back to the place it all happened, Saanich, British Columbia. Saanich is located on Vancouver Island, which sits off the west coast of Canada in the province of British Columbia. Vancouver Island is separated from the mainland by the Strait of Georgia, and there are no bridges connecting the island to the mainland. So you can only get to Vancouver Island by taking a ferry or a plane. There's obviously practical reasons for why there are no bridges, infrastructure challenges, engineering challenges, but it also feels psychological. Vancouver Island is deeply connected to the mainland culturally and historically and everything, and yet it remains almost intentionally separate. And that separation creates a subtle yet powerful feeling. Time moves differently, life feels slower and more intentional, and the hustle and bustle of the mainland feels distant. You don't just pass through Vancouver Island, you arrive there. You have to make an intentional choice to go there. And the people who choose to build their lives on the island value things like quality of life, connection with nature, close community. Vancouver Island is tight-knit. People tend to know their neighbors and notice unfamiliar faces, but they don't notice unfamiliar faces in a way where they're necessarily suspicious. They're just observant. This is a place you retreat to, not escape from, where people lower their guard and where strangers don't automatically register a threat. And that's what makes what happened to Lindsay Buziak feel profoundly dissonant. This wasn't just a murder in a vacant house. It was violence introduced into a community that didn't expect it and also wasn't accustomed to it. In 2008, Vancouver Island had a very low violent crime rate. People didn't lock their doors religiously. Professionals like real estate agents would routinely meet strangers that they'd only talk to over email or whatever for normal business dealings. There wasn't like a fear of that. Residents weren't watching for threats, and trust was built into everyday life. In 2008, Lindsay Buziak's murder was the first of the year in the Greater Victoria area. And let me actually quickly explain what that means. Victoria, the political center and capital city of British Columbia, is located on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. It's really pretty there. It's a small coastal city surrounded by suburban communities like Saanich. And together, those suburban communities make up what is known as Greater Victoria. Saanich is the second largest municipality on Vancouver Island, and in 2008, they had a population of about 110,000 residents. At that time, Saanich was largely suburban and residential. It had quiet middle and upper class neighborhoods, on tree-lined streets, small businesses, a place where you could work and raise your family, but it's just a very short drive away from Victoria, which had the bars and the restaurants and things like that. So for context, in British Columbia, some cities like Saanich and Victoria have their own municipal police departments, while other communities are policed directly by the RCMP. So 9 months before Lindsay's murder, the RCMP and Victoria Police joined forces to form the Vancouver Island Homicide Unit. That team would be responsible for the vast majority of Vancouver Island, with the exception of Saanich and Oak Bay, another town. They opted out of joining the unit. Saanich decided to opt out because their police chief, Mike Chadwick, he said they already solved most of their homicides alone and in a cost-effective way, and I suppose that was true. But once again, Saanich also didn't see a ton of violent crime, as we've already discussed, and so I believe they had a police force that was ill-equipped to handle a complex homicide like Lindsay Buziak's. The comparison of the Boulder Police Department and John Benet Ramsey's murder kept popping up in my head as I went through this case. Both areas, Boulder and Saanich, had experience in handling some crime, like low volume, violent crime, isolated incidents with clear suspects and cases that typically resolved relatively quickly, but they were not ever really dealing with highly planned homicides, crimes involving multiple coordinated suspects, things like staged lures, burner phones, possible organized crime elements, or crimes with no obvious motive and no direct suspect pool. And as you'll see, these kinds of things are all hallmarks of Lindsay Buziak's murder. Lindsay was born on November 2nd, 1983, in Victoria to her parents, Jeff Buziak, a real estate agent, and Evelyn Wright-Mader, a stay-at-home mother. Almost 2 years to the day after Lindsay was born, her little sister Sarah entered the world in 1986, and the two girls obviously grew up very close. They were close in age, they're sisters, they're the only children of their parents. They used to celebrate their birthdays together, and when the family would spend summers in Lake Cowichan, the sisters spent their days going out on the sailboat, boogie boarding, and swimming. And Sarah actually said she learned how how to swim so that she could keep up with Lindsay and the older kids. And overall, these summers created amazing memories frozen in time for the entire Buziak family. Now, as the girls got older, those trips became their own small adventures. When Lindsay got her first car, a battered Suzuki Sidekick, she and Sarah would pile in and make the drive themselves. And Sarah later joked that she was never quite sure how the car managed to run at all, but somehow they always made it to the lake in one piece. Even though the Suzuki wasn't so lucky, eventually all the letters on the car, the ones that spell Suzuki, they fell off, which is something that Sarah said she and Lindsay always laughed about. Now, in the mid-90s, Jeff and Evelyn split up. Evelyn retained, I believe, main custody of Sarah and Lindsay, and then Jeff moved to Calgary in 2003, where he worked in commercial real estate while still remaining close to his daughters and invested in their lives. And partly because of Jeff, her father, Lindsay became interested in working in real estate. But long before Lindsay became a young real estate agent, she'd been in a relationship with a man named Matt McDuff. This began when she was 18. The two dated for about 5 years, and by the time of Lindsay's death in 2008, they had been separated for over a year, and they weren't really still in contact. Now, in interviews, Matt McDuff described their relationship as being stormy at times, but he denied ever being violent towards Lindsay. And, according to Lindsay's family and the people that I've talked to, Matt wasn't violent. There wasn't any sort of allegations that he'd ever been abusive or terrible to her. He was a little older than her. They met when Lindsay was young and Matt was kind of in his 20s, and there were normal relationship issues and some other incompatibility issues, but Lindsay and Matt really cared about each other, and when they broke up, it wasn't on bad terms. Now, law enforcement did not identify Matt McDuff as a suspect in Lindsay's murder, and both he and the police have said there was no connection between that past relationship and the crime. Although you'll see, some people will try to suggest that Matt McDuff may have had something to do with what happened to Lindsay. Now, towards the end of that relationship, Lindsay enrolled in the UBC Sauder School of Business Real Estate Trading Services program. That's a mouthful. And she also started attending a workshop hosted by real estate tutor Helen Jones. Now, the thing about Lindsay was that she worked hard at whatever she did. She wanted to be the best at whatever field of work she chose to tackle, and attending a realty workshop like this would have helped her do that in the real estate field. Lindsay was dedicated, a hard worker, and there was something in Lindsay that clearly always knew she would succeed at whatever she set her mind to. She had confidence. She had a surety. She was very, full of belief in herself, which is great, especially for someone that young. Lindsay's own bio from her Facebook account in 2006 says a lot about her and the way she saw herself. Quote, extremely adorable, loves to joke, very good sense of humor, will try almost anything once, loves to be pampered, energetic, loves being in long relationships, talkative, loves to party, but at times to the extreme, loves the smell and feel of money and is good at making it, but just as good at spending it. Very protective over loved ones, hard worker, can be a good friend, but if disrespected by a friend, the friendship will end. Romantic, caring, end quote. So yeah, Lindsay's basically saying here, I love money. I'm good at making it. I'm good at spending it, but I have no problem working hard to be successful in life. And I think it's important to note the part where she says she loves being in long relationships, but she also says, hey, I'm loyal. But if you show that you don't respect me or that you're not kind of investing equally into the relationship with me as I am with you, then I have no problem cutting you off completely. And I think that suggests, once again, a really good self-image of herself. She knows her worth. She knows what she'll tolerate, what she won't. She's good at setting boundaries and, following through on that. If she tells somebody, hey, I'm with you to the end, unless you do this, this, and this, and then they do that and that and that, Lindsay will say, I'm all set, I'm done. And we're going to see that reflected, I think, in another romantic relationship. Now, in Helen Jones's real estate workshop, Lindsay will learn the ins and outs of real estate, how to generate leads, how to build her personal brand, work referrals, run effective house showings, how to work with buyers versus sellers, and also how to network, which is extremely important in the real estate business. As I found out, these real estate workshops are intentionally social. They kind of bring people in from different real estate industries. So, not just agents, but mortgage brokers, industry professionals. And part of the goal is to bring these people together, these young, ambitious people who all are working in somewhat of the same field. And so they could create relationships and then work together to be successful in the future. So, for instance, Lindsay's a real estate agent. If she meets a mortgage broker and they hit it off and they have a good working partnership, they can both mutually benefit from Lindsay going out and getting buyers for houses, and then the buyer needs what? A mortgage. So now she's like, "Hey, I know a guy or a girl," and she gives them the card of her friend, the mortgage broker. So during this workshop, Lindsay would obviously meet a lot of people, but it was one specific person, a young man that Lindsay was seated across from, that she connected with the most. His name was Jason Zalo. And Jason came from a prominent family in the Victoria real estate world. Jason had played competitive hockey in the United States for a few years before returning home to Vancouver Island to work for his father. In an interview with Xander Sherman, Jason said he worked for his father, quote, doing tile setting and that kind of stuff, end quote, which I take to mean that Jason's father was involved in some kind of residential construction or renovation. But after doing this for a few years, Jason got into real estate like his mother, Shirley Zalo. Now, according to her bio, Shirley has been successfully selling real estate in the Victoria, British Columbia area of Vancouver Island since 1998. And she's consistently one of Victoria's top real estate agents. So it was their mutual start down the path towards a career in real estate that brought both Lindsay and Jason to Helen Jones's workshop, where they met and they hit it off. Jason said, quote, "When we first started talking, she was very nice, sweet, kind to me for sure. Business-wise, it did seem like she wanted to be a realtor, really wanted to be successful, and she knew what she wanted," end quote. Helen Jones also remembers both Lindsay and Jason, and she said that Lindsay was always very well put together. She took a lot of pride in how she presented herself to the world. I take that to mean as in the way she dressed, the way she projected an image outwards, the way she treated people. But it wasn't an instant romantic thing between Lindsay and Jason at first. Lindsay would go on to pass her real estate exam and get her license in June of 2006, at which point she became one of 20 real estate agents in Greater Victoria under the age of 25. And it was then that she and Jason crossed paths again, and that's when they started dating. According to Helen Jones, the two seemed like a good fit. She said, quote, "He was a nice young man. He looked after himself well, and they made a lovely couple because it was something that was very important to both of them," end quote. Once again, I take that to mean that both Lindsay and Jason cared about what they looked like, how they presented themselves to the world. Now, Lindsay's friend, Vicky Mackey, felt that Lindsay and Jason were a power couple, and initially, Lindsay was very impressed with the Zalo family. Quote, "She really looked up to the fact that Jason was in the real estate industry and his mom was too. It seemed like she was happy with his mom and excited to be a part of their circle. He was a little bit further ahead than her, just being older, and he was a bit more of an established realtor, and she was just starting out. She was very drawn to that because she was so focused on her career and she wanted to do so well, and she was a hard worker. They seemed at the beginning that they could conquer anything," end quote. From what I can tell, Jason wasn't that much further ahead in the real estate business than Lindsay was. He had just gotten his real estate license in 2006 as well, and he got his mortgage broker's license the following year. So he was licensed to do both things, get mortgages and sell houses. Things moved very, very fast for Lindsay and Jason. They started dating, and then by the summer of 2007, they were living together in a lake house that Shirley Zalo had purchased in May of that same year. Now, Shirley would later say that this home on Shawnigan Lake was purchased after the deaths of both her parents, and it was meant to be a vacation spot for friends and family. She'd paid $1.3 million for it, and she also spent about $200,000 in renovations and furnishings. So we can see Shirley's got some money, right? Shirley Zalo's got some money. She's doing good in the real estate world. And Shirley wanted to clear this up because it was alleged, I believe by Lindsay's father, Jeff, that Shirley had purchased the lake house for Jason and Lindsay to live in. And it was kind of this way of luring Lindsay away from her family and her friends and kind of making her a little bit more isolated. But Shirley has denied this. Lindsay and Jason moved into the lake house in June, and then in August, Lindsay's father, Jeff Buziak, traveled from Calgary to visit with Lindsay at the lake house, and this was the first time he met both Jason and Shirley Zalo, and his first impression was not great, especially with Shirley. According to Jeff, the two had some sort of altercation during which Shirley was extremely rude and aggressive to him. Now, here is a reenactment of that situation, which Jeff filmed with an actress to illustrate to us what went down, what happened, and how he was very taken aback by it.
Get out of my way. I want to get a glass.
Pardon me?
Do you fucking know who I am? When I say get the fuck out of my way, I mean get the fuck out of my way.
Wrong fucking guy, lady. Clean up your act, or that pretty little girl out there and I are leaving in about 3 minutes. Do you understand that fucking language?
Okay. Please. Get the fuck out of my way.
Fill your boots, lady.
Now, according to Jeff, after this happened, Lindsay and he did not leave, but he wasn't happy about it, and neither was Lindsay. He had talked to her about it, and Lindsay said, she wasn't really happy with that kind of behavior from Shirley, and it wasn't the first time she had seen her act that way. Now, by August, Lindsay was working at the Remax brokerage that employed Jason, his mother Shirley, and his brother Ryan. Now, all four, Lindsay, Ryan, Jason, and Shirley, they were part of the Remax Camosun offices and related local Remax offices on Vancouver Island. So Remax is a company that does real estate, and they've got several different branches and locations. Shirley Zalo has been described as being a manager at both the Camosun and West Shore offices, which would make her Lindsay's boss, also the boss of her two sons, Jason and Ryan, technically. But by the end of the summer, it seemed that Lindsay was not really happy living at the house on Shawnigan Lake. The lake house was great. It was beautiful, great location, but it was kind of far out. It wasn't close to downtown where Lindsay worked, where her friends were, where all the action was. The commute every day from the house to her office would have been 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the traffic. And Lindsay was young. She wanted to be close to her friends, to the restaurants, the bars, for the sake of her social life. So Jason and Lindsay ended up leaving the lake house and moving into a one-bedroom condo in a waterfront building at 68 Songhees Road in Victoria. This is a part of the city known as Songhees in the Vic West neighborhood. The building itself, often called the Shutters, is a modern resort-style condominium. It's really nice, beautiful. There's amenities like a pool, gym, spa facilities, secure parking. They've got many units that offer water views or access to landscaped courtyards. Just really nice, expensive, right? And it was located in a great place because the residents were just steps away from the inner harbor, scenic walkways, restaurants, and downtown Victoria, blending peaceful scenic living with the convenience of urban life right outside their doors. So Lindsay and Jason left this great lake house property, but they still have some of that like waterfront views and, nice living area with the convenience of being downtown. Now, you might ask yourself how two young real estate agents just starting out could afford a place like this. And the answer is that they couldn't. They didn't. The condo belonged to Jason's mother, Shirley Zalo, and she had purchased it in February of 2007. And then it appears that she put the condo into the name of Jason's brother, Ryan, although it does not seem that he ever lived there. So Shirley purchases the condo. I want to say 95%, I believe she purchased it in cash. She spent a lot of money, I think $20K renovating that and furnishing it. And then she put it in her son Ryan's name. So that's interesting. We're going to come back to that. Now, from the outside, Jason and Lindsay looked as though they had it all. They were two attractive, well-put-together people working in the same field, building their careers, helping each other. They seemed to have a lot in common. They had a lot of fun together. They had mutual admiration for each other, with Jason saying that when they started dating, everything just clicked. He said, quote, "Everything about her was just perfect for me. That's how I felt," end quote. But as 2007 drew to a close, there are reports that Lindsay was beginning to feel differently about Jason. So in mid-December, Lindsay flew to Calgary to visit with her father, Jeff, for 3 to 4 days. During this visit, Jeff claims that Lindsay told him she felt that Jason didn't have the same ambition as her. She was thinking about ending the relationship. In an interview with the YouTube channel Crack House Chronicles, Jeff said, quote, "I think Lindsay was a couple steps above Jason's place. And so he really adored her, idolized her, and just really loved her. And Jason just wasn't the right guy for her. He was too much, too overbearing, too jealous, too insecure, those sorts of things. Lindsay was very confident in her own abilities, her own social skills. Jason wasn't, and it became a problem. So Lindsay wanted to end that relationship and move on, but the problem was she worked for Jason's mom, and so there were some intertwining there, and of course, Jason didn't want to let her go, so there was attempts to keep her in the fold. There's talk out there. Lindsay was confused. She changed her mind. Not really. I kept in really close contact with her. There was a lot of pressure on her to not leave the relationship, but that was her focus, to end the relationship. She just said, "Daddy, I can't do it. He's not my guy. He's not the right guy for me." End quote. So Jeff is saying here that Lindsay kind of maybe thought Jason was as motivated as her and was on the same path as her and had the same plans as she did and they could build something together. But then she figured out that maybe he's not as invested as I am. And on top of that, according to Jeff, there was some issues with being controlling, possessive, kind of wanting to hide Lindsay away from the world. Now, what Jeff also says is that there was certain attempts made to keep Lindsay in the fold, to keep her with Jason. So this suggests that at least Jason and maybe some other members of his family were aware that Lindsay was trying to get out of this relationship, although they will say later they had no idea. So Jeff said that Jason Zalo was a big guy. He had a temper, he could get jealous, and he wasn't used to having the type of woman that Lindsay was. He said both Jason and his mother, Shirley, were jealous of Lindsay's beauty, her youth, her social skills, which were remarkable. Jeff said, quote, "She was just dynamic. I used to sit there and watch her sometimes in social situations with a smile on my face, sometimes shaking my head just like, wow. She's just so good at it. It was natural for her," end quote. And as you know, in real estate, if you're extremely extroverted and you have a way with people and you're social and you're smiling and people just want to be around you, that's a great traits to have. Now, Jeff Buziak said he feels that Jason was overwhelmed by it because without trying, Lindsay would be the light in the room. He said, quote, "You have to be quite a secure man to have a girlfriend like that," end quote. Jeff said that Lindsay discussed with him the process of leaving Jason while dealing with his mother, Shirley, who she knew could get quite mean and nasty. He said, quote, "As far as her visit with me, it was specifically to discuss that. Like, Daddy, how do I get out of this mess?" Those were the exact words, end quote. While Lindsay was in Calgary talking to Jeff about this, Jeff asked her, what does your mother have to say about the whole thing? You should be talking to her about it too, getting her advice. And Lindsay told Jeff that she could not talk to her mother about it because Evelyn loved Jason. Evelyn thought he was great, but Lindsay said he wasn't great. He was an idiot. So during this visit in December, Jeff claims Lindsay also told him that she had seen something that she should not have. He pressed her for details, and Lindsay told Jeff, "I can't say anything more now, but I'll tell you later." So while in Calgary, Lindsay met up with some old friends she'd known in her younger days. We're going to talk about that later. And she returned to Victoria on December 19th. Now, it's important to understand that Jeff Buziak was not the only person Lindsay confided in about her plans to break up with Jason Zalo. After returning from Calgary, Lindsay went for a night out with her friend, Nikki Burrows. They had dinner and some drinks, and then the two women returned to Lindsay's condo, and thinking Jason was asleep in the bedroom, they started talking quietly in the living room. And Lindsay said that she was planning to leave Jason in the new year. But as they talked, they suddenly heard a noise. They looked up to see Jason standing in the bedroom door. Nikki and Lindsay jumped up and ran out of the condo. Jason called Lindsay several times after this. Some sources say 30 times. And I honestly have no idea why Lindsay and Nikki would have felt that they needed to run out of the condo when they saw Jason was hearing their conversation. I don't know if there was previous interactions where Jason had shown he could be upset or aggressive or violent, but we know Lindsay did not return to the condo for several hours after. Now, some sources say that when Jason heard what they were talking about, he freaked out, and then Nikki ran out of the condo scared, and Lindsay ran after her to try and calm her down, but we really don't have the full story, and honestly, we probably never will, because a lot of the people who used to talk about this case, including many of Lindsay's friends, they have stopped talking. They don't want to talk about it anymore, and there could be several reasons for that. We may discuss those reasons later if I feel legally safe doing so. Another friend, Vicky Mackey, visited Lindsay at the condo in December of 2007 as well. Now, she had gone there to invite Lindsay to a Christmas party, but Lindsay declined, although she did offer to help Vicky get ready for the party. Now, Vicky said that she had seen a change in her friend since the relationship with Jason Zalo had started, and she suspected that Lindsay, who would normally have wanted to go to the party, had said no because of Jason. Vicky said, quote, "Normally, Lindsay would be coming to a Christmas party with a bunch of her friends. I was quite surprised that she wasn't going to come with me. I felt like she wasn't coming because Jason did not want her to go." End quote. So in the bathroom of the condo, Lindsay helped Vicky do her hair. Vicky said she was putting some hair extensions in, and they talked in whispers so as not to be heard by Jason, who was home. Vicky said, quote, "She was basically telling me that she wanted to get out of this relationship and that she wasn't happy." End quote. But if you ask Jason Zalo, he and Lindsay were the perfect couple. He felt he had found the person he would be with for the rest of his life, and although he does not dispute there were issues in the relationship, as there's issues in all relationships, he claims they never talked about breaking up, and he never got the feeling that she wanted to end things. Jason said, quote, "I was in love with Lindsay for sure. Like I say, we did a lot of things together. We hung out all the time. We even worked together separately, but helped each other." End quote. And Jason has legitimately said verbatim, "She never told me she wanted to break up with me. We never talked about breaking up." Now, Lindsay's little sister, Sarah, has also gone on record to say that Lindsay and Jason seemed happy and that Jason treated her sister well. But she also said, quote, "Because she was my protector," speaking about Lindsay, "I don't think she'd ever tell me things of concern because she would never want me to worry." End quote. Now, towards the end of the month of December, Lindsay went on a trip to Whistler, British Columbia with Jason, his mother Shirley, and several members of his family for Christmas. Reportedly, this was a very extravagant trip, and Jason gave Lindsay many expensive gifts for Christmas. Could this be one of the efforts that were being made to keep Lindsay in the fold and to keep her from not breaking up with Jason, as Jeff Buziak had stated earlier? He seems to think so, and it's possible. So according to Lindsay's mother, Evelyn, though, the relationship between her daughter and Jason Zalo seemed to have improved after this trip, and Evelyn stated that Lindsay had told her they'd had so much fun in Whistler and said, quote, "This was the perfect thing. We needed to spend more time together." End quote. Now, towards the end of January 2008, Lindsay emailed her friend Vicky Mackey about a bachelorette party that was coming up on February 2nd. This is important because, as we will find out, February 2nd is also the day that Lindsay scheduled an appointment at 5:30 p.m. to show a house to a couple who were coming from out of town and needed to buy right away. This email from Lindsay to Vicky said, quote, "I really need your assistance getting a stagette organized for D. Somewhat a surprise. Please help, and you better come. XOXO." End quote. So stagette, it's like a stag party for a woman, and it's a bachelorette party. And D stands for Deanna Shue, a mutual friend of both Lindsay's and Vicky's. So as it turns out, even before Lindsay scheduled the February 2nd appointment to show a house, her schedule was already pretty full that night. Besides the bachelorette party on the mainland that Lindsay seemed to be part of organizing, she was expected at her friend Andrea's birthday party on Vancouver Island.
Lindsay introduced Sabrina to Dallas Clark and Andrea Lalani in elementary school, and the four were inseparable. Now just a trio, they hold hands supporting each other to speak about the night Lindsay died.
Or the evening was actually my birthday. She was supposed to have been at my birthday party and never showed up.
All three women were aware that Lindsay was considering ending her common-law relationship with Jason Zalo.
So you heard in that clip that all three of Lindsay's closest friends from childhood were aware that Lindsay was planning to end her relationship with Jason Zalo. These women had known Lindsay since elementary school, so that puts the number of friends who had confirmed that Lindsay wanted to break up with Jason to 5. Vicky Mackey, Nikki Burrows, Sabrina Unke, Dallas Clark, and Andrea Lalani. Also, Lindsay's father, Jeff. So I think it is safe to say that we can be confident of the fact that Lindsay had at least talked about and expressed her dissatisfaction with her relationship and her desire to end it. You know, whether she ever talked about it with Jason is another story, but if she was talking about it with her friends and her father and she didn't bring it up with Jason, as he claims, the question would be why? Was she trying to figure out how to navigate the tricky situation of leaving Jason while still working for his mother? Did she not feel safe bringing the topic up to Jason, afraid of how he would react and what he might do? I'm sure I don't have to remind you of the statistics. We're true crime people here. You guys watch me. We talk about it all the time. Here's a quick overview, just in case, though. Across decades of studies in North America and internationally, researchers have found that the period when a woman is leaving or trying to leave or has just left a relationship is the most dangerous time in her life. This finding appears consistently in research cited by the CDC, the World Health Organization, the National Institute of Justice, and multiple peer-reviewed criminology and public health studies. Studies show that the risk of intimate partner homicide increases dramatically when a woman attempts to leave a relationship, and some analyses estimate the risk increases by 5 to 7 times during the separation period compared to when the relationship is going on. So in many cases of intimate partner homicide, the victim has told friends or family that she wanted to leave, but had not yet told her partner. And researchers note that withholding the breakup conversation with the partner while confiding in others is common, especially when the person anticipates an emotionally intense or destabilizing reaction. Now, this doesn't mean that Lindsay was afraid of Jason. It doesn't mean that Jason had ever hurt her physically throughout their relationship or that he had anything to do with her murder. It just illustrates that this is a statistically recognized risk period for a woman, and that's why it's relevant. And I want to say that Jason could have had a conversation with Lindsay about wanting to break up, but then she got murdered, and he didn't want to be honest about the fact that he knew she was kind of, on her way out the door because he thought that would make him look more suspicious. So he lied, trying to, protect himself. Or she did have the conversation about wanting to break up and he just lied because he might have had something to do with it. Or she didn't have the conversation with him, which isn't necessarily a green flag. That doesn't mean that she didn't want to get out of the relationship, because as I think we have come to the conclusion on with all of her friends and her father saying that Lindsay had conversations with them about wanting to leave Jason, we have to trust and believe that all of these people cannot be lying. Okay, back to the busy schedule that Lindsay had on February 2nd. We have a house showing at 5:30 p.m. We're going to talk more about that later. We have a bachelorette party on the mainland that night, meaning Lindsay's going to have to take a ferry to get to the mainland for that bachelorette party. We have a birthday party on the island that night, and additionally, according to the Oak Bay News, Lindsay had also submitted an advertisement for an open house on February 2nd from 1 to 3 p.m. Now we're going to find out as we go through the timeline that Lindsay could not have possibly attended this open house. And according to the author of the Murder on D'Souza blog back in 2008, when realtors advertised in newspapers, that ad would usually be submitted 5 to 7 days prior to being published. And once submitted, the ad could not be changed or canceled. It's not like the internet days where we can edit things, change things, erase them. It's going in the paper. So it's possible once Lindsay made the appointment for the open house and once she saw how busy her day was and thinking that the appointment for the house showed more promise for a sale, it would be more of a sure thing for a sale, Lindsay may have found another realtor to do the 1 to 3 open house, or she may have just told the listing agent she couldn't make it and they had to find someone else. But at least a week prior to February 2nd, Lindsay was planning to be present at this open house from 1 to 3 p.m. Okay, there's a few things you need to know before we dive into this timeline. And one of them is that Lindsay was in communication with some clients who were interested in purchasing a home through her. She'd set an appointment to show them some homes on Saturday, February 2nd, 2008. And she had expressed to a few people that she was nervous about the appointment because she had never met these people before. They'd called her out of the blue, and she would be showing the house to them alone. I also want to address the fact that Jason Zalo and the rest of his family, Shirley Zalo and Ryan Zalo, have been cleared as being suspects by the Saanich Police Department. We're going to talk about that later. They have technically been cleared, as in the police are like, hey, we don't think they had anything to do with Lindsay's murder. Now, from my perspective, I don't necessarily agree that they had nothing to do with Lindsay's murder. And there's a lot of reasons why. We're going to get into it when we go into the timeline. I am not sitting here and saying that Jason Zalo is guilty. I am not sitting here certainly and saying that he killed Lindsay. I don't think he did. But I think it's worth it to explore what other possible connections the Zalo family could have to what happened to Lindsay on February 2nd, 2008. So I'm not accusing anybody. Everything's alleged and my opinion, and anything I have an issue with, I will back up with evidence about why I have an issue about it. So don't come for me. Okay, let's talk about January 31st, 2008, when Lindsay Buziak allegedly received a call from a woman who was interested in buying a house. Lindsay was a realtor, right? So this normally wouldn't be out of the ordinary, but there were a few odd details about this call and this caller. So first of all, the incoming phone number was from a Vancouver area code, but the call came into Lindsay's personal cell phone, not her work cell phone, not the number she would put into listings, or like you saw in that open house listing, she would put a number there that would be her work cell phone. This person called her personal cell phone, and reportedly the new client told Lindsay that she'd gotten this cell phone number, Lindsay's personal cell phone number, from a previous client that Lindsay had sold a home to. We're going to come back to that. Now, the woman who called Lindsay allegedly spoke with a thick accent that made it difficult for Lindsay to understand her, but this woman claimed that her husband was being relocated to Victoria. They needed to purchase a home soon, within just a few days. And Lindsay's notes about the call said, quote, 1 million, new, 3-bed plus 3-bath, large master bedroom, housekeeper, separate area for housekeeper, 530, needs to buy in 2 days, end quote. So this was her day planner. The police had found it after her murder, and they saw that she had made these notes about this caller and about this homebuyer and what kind of things they were looking for in a new house. Now, aside from Lindsay jotting some notes down in her planner, we also have Lindsay's friend, Rianne, who confirms that Lindsay had a phone call with a client on the evening of January 31st. Rianne said that she was on the phone with Lindsay that night around 8 p.m. when Lindsay told her that she had to go because the clients were calling on the other line, and she said she would call Rianne back. Now, Lindsay allegedly referred to the clients as the Mexicans due to the thick accent of the woman, and this is how she described the people who were calling her during her phone call with Rianne. She was like, I have to go, the Mexicans are calling. Now, in this case, it has been sort of suggested that January 31st was the first time Lindsay Buziak had contact with these mystery clients. But the fact that she told Rianne that the Mexicans were calling on the evening of January 31st suggests to me that Lindsay had had prior contact with them, either earlier that day or earlier in the week, and not just over email, but over the phone, because Lindsay was able to know that this woman had an accent, a very thick accent. Now, what we do know is that it was probably on this day that the appointment was set for Lindsay to show these clients some homes, and that appointment was set for Saturday, February 2nd at 5:30 p.m. On February 1st, 2008, Lindsay spent a good portion of her day with a friend of hers. They started out at her condo. From there, they went out to have lunch. They got manicures, ran some errands, and Lindsay returned back home around 4 p.m. that night. And according to Jason's mother, Shirley Zalo, Lindsay called her and asked if she wanted to get dinner that night because Jason had hockey. Jason played in a hockey league. So Shirley claims that she got to Lindsay and Jason's condo around 7:15, and when she entered, Lindsay was on the phone with the mystery clients. Shirley said that the phone call lasted roughly 15 minutes, and she also said she didn't hear much of the conversation, but it seemed like Lindsay was making plans to meet up with them the next day, which would be Saturday, February 2nd, and Shirley also heard Lindsay give the clients a specific address, which would end up being the address of the house where Lindsay would be killed, 1702 De Sousa Place, a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom home located in the Gordon Head neighborhood of Saanich. Now, the house itself, well, it fit all the criteria that Lindsay had written down in her day planner. It was listed for sale at around $964,000. It was a new build, and it was vacant at that time, which would make a quick purchase and a quick move-in possible, which is what these clients wanted, and the house had space for a housekeeper. Now, De Sousa Place was located on a cul-de-sac off of Torquay Drive, and there's a backstory. So the home was owned and still is owned today by a man named Joe De Sousa. And when his parents immigrated to Canada in 1961, they had purchased their first home at 4327 Torquay Drive. So that's the drive that the cul-de-sac is off of. That's the road that De Sousa Place is off of. In 2006, Joe De Sousa subdivided that property, and he created the De Sousa Place cul-de-sac, and he built 6 new homes there between 2007 and 2008. One of those homes was 1702 De Sousa Place, and according to the Saanich Police Department, that home was professionally cleaned on the afternoon of Saturday, February 2nd, 2008, the same day Lindsay planned to bring her clients there to view it. As we will find out, it wasn't necessarily professionally cleaned. It was actually cleaned by Joe De Sousa's wife that day, but we're going to have questions about why did the police say it was professionally cleaned? Why did Joe De Sousa have his wife clean the house that day? We're going to also find Joe De Sousa himself was at the house that day and left just about 30 minutes before Lindsay and the clients showed up. And there's other things we're going to find out. There were workmen at the house. They were doing some work on the house that day. We are going to talk about this house and what it means to the entire puzzle of this case in a little bit. We're also going to come back to Joe De Sousa because, as it turns out, Joe De Sousa has some pretty strong ties to the Zalo family, at least Shirley Zalo. So stay tuned for that. Let's return to the evening of February 1st when Shirley Zalo went to Lindsay's condo to grab dinner, and she had to wait for Lindsay to finish up with her phone call. After the call, Shirley claimed that she and Lindsay took a long walk, and during this walk, Lindsay expressed to Shirley that she was afraid of her ex-boyfriend, Matt McDuff. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. This is just my opinion. I don't believe that ever happened. I don't believe that Lindsay ever told Shirley Zalo that she was afraid of her ex-boyfriend, Matt McDuff. First of all, Lindsay and Matt hadn't even had contact with each other for about a year. Second of all, unlike the claims that Lindsay wanted to break up with Jason, no one else has ever said that Lindsay told them she was afraid of Matt McDuff. I truly, wholeheartedly, 100% believe that this never happened. And in that case, we have another question in front of us. If I'm right, and Lindsay never told Shirley that she was afraid of her ex-boyfriend, Matt McDuff, why would Shirley say that? Why would she do that? I don't know. Let's keep it up on the board as one of the questions we're going to have to ask and come back to. So after this long walk where Lindsay made this proclamation of fear about Matt, Shirley and Lindsay then went downtown where they had dinner at a sushi restaurant. The owner of the blog, Murder on De Sousa Place, has claimed that there's no evidence at all that Shirley and Lindsay ever had lunch at the sushi place. There's no receipts. There's no proof that this lunch ever happened, but Shirley says it does, so we're going to go on that for now. It's all we have. And during this lunch, Lindsay chatted with Shirley about her plans for the following day, plans that included showing some houses to her new clients and also hopefully getting to Vancouver in time to make her friend's bachelorette party. Shirley said, quote, "I could see she was a little bit, maybe overwhelmed might be the word, with all the things she had to do the next day, and that's why I offered to help her." End quote. According to Shirley, she told Lindsay, I can show this house for you. Your boyfriend Jason can show the house. My son Ryan, he can show the house. We're all real estate agents and we're all available this next day, Saturday, February 2nd, to show houses to your clients for you. And Shirley told Lindsay, if you need some help and you choose to have us, do these house showings for you so that you can go to your bachelorette party, just give one of us a call. Shirley also said that at no point during this lunch or during her day on February 1st with Lindsay did Lindsay ever express any fear or concern or nervousness about showing the house to the clients the next day. Shirley said Lindsay just seemed stressed about getting everything done and how she was going to make everything happen. As I mentioned earlier, Jason Zalo had been playing hockey that night at Perks Arena, and he would tell journalist Xander Sherman that he'd left home around 7:30 p.m. Admittedly, this does not really line up with his mother Shirley's recollection of arriving to the condo around 7:15 p.m., because Shirley said when she got there, Jason had already left, and it was just Lindsay on the phone with her clients. But I guess that's not a huge deal at this point. It's such a small window of time, 15 minutes. Jason could have left earlier than he thought. Shirley could have gotten there later than she thought. Both Jason and Shirley say they didn't see each other that night, so by the time Shirley got there, Jason had left. That's their story, and like I said, small window of time that can be easily explained. Jason also told Xander Sherman, the journalist, that his mother Shirley had told him about Lindsay's call that night and that he wasn't sure whether the clients had called Lindsay or if she had called them or if the call took place on her cell phone or their house phone. Jason claimed that when he returned home that night, it was a little after midnight, Lindsay was still awake, so they sat up in bed talking for a while. Jason told Xander Sherman that during their late-night conversation, Lindsay had mentioned that Shirley Zalo had told her to let Jason show the house for her so that Lindsay could still go to the mainland and go to her friend's bachelorette party. Jason said, quote, "She was supposed to leave to Vancouver. And again, being a realtor, I just said, well, I can show the 2 or 3 homes and you can go to Vancouver with your girlfriends," end quote. Which, if that happened, and what Jason is saying is true, would sort of, undermine Jeff Buziak's claims that Jason was possessive and jealous and things like that. Because he's like, yeah, I want you to go to a bachelorette party. I don't know what boyfriend is super thrilled about his girlfriend going to a bachelorette party, but he's like, I want you to go get drunk with your girlfriends and drink out of penis straws, have the best time, and I will show these houses for you. So is it true? Is it true that Shirley offered to show the houses for Lindsay? Is it true that Jason also offered? I don't know. So Lindsay will be murdered on February 2nd. And after her murder, when the police get there, etc., Jason's going to be brought into the police station and questioned. And this is happening on the evening of February 2nd into the early morning hours of February 3rd. And Jason at that time told the police that Lindsay had seemed to not understand why these mystery clients had chosen her to sell them their new home. He said the whole scenario seemed to be too good to be true. Now, when questioned by Xander Sherman about Jason's statement to the police that it seemed too good to be true and Lindsay wasn't sure why these clients had contacted her, Jason said that he did remember Lindsay saying that, and he said, quote, "It wasn't concern, it was that she was a new young realtor," kind of saying to herself or me, like, I wonder how they got my name, or I wonder why they are calling me, end quote. So once again, this isn't Jason saying that Lindsay was concerned about going to the 5:30 appointment alone or that she was like nervous because she didn't know these people. It was Lindsay expressing like, why me? I haven't sold them any houses. I think at that point, Lindsay had been a part of maybe 5 or 6 house selling transactions. I'm new. I don't really have a ton of experience under my belt. Why did they choose me? But she was not saying to him, I'm a little scared to go alone, or I'm a little nervous, I don't know these people, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Jason also told the police that on the Thursday before this, which would have been January 31st, Lindsay had told him that she'd spoken to the mystery client again, and that the client had said she and her husband were arriving on Saturday to look at some properties. Jason told the police that he believed Lindsay had sent the woman an email with some of the potential homes that they could look at on Saturday, and he said he had asked Lindsay on Thursday if she'd sent the woman any more email messages to follow up, to which Lindsay responded that she planned to do that the following day, which would be February 1st, 2008. This is the same day that Jason has a hockey practice or a game. This is the same day Shirley Zalo comes over and hears Lindsay on the phone with her clients, and then they go on a long walk and they go and have sushi. The same day that Jason gets home a little after midnight and they sit up in bed and talk about this meeting, and Jason offers to do it for Lindsay. Jason also told the police that he was present during one occasion when Lindsay attempted to reach this woman mystery client with a thick accent, but Lindsay had been unable to get the client on the phone. On the morning of Saturday, February 2nd, Jason told the police that he'd been at the condo when the phone at the condo rang. He said the caller was a woman with a broken Spanish accent, and this woman asked for Lindsay. Jason told the woman that Lindsay was out, and he offered to give her Lindsay's cell phone number, but the woman said she already had the number, and then the conversation ended. Years later, Xander Sherman questioned Jason about this statement to the police, made in February of 2008. Xander told Jason, quote, "It sounds like you actually spoke to this woman." And then Jason said, quote, "If that's what I said in that statement back then yeah, I did," end quote. So what I'm getting here is that Jason claims on Saturday morning, February 2nd, I would assume after Lindsay had already left the house, he gets a call on their home phone, and it's a woman with a thick Spanish accent, or a broken Spanish accent, as Jason described it. She's asking for Lindsay, and she says she already has Lindsay's cell phone number. So yeah, Xander Sherman is saying, well, this could have been the mystery client, right? The person we're trying to track down. Do you remember telling the police that? And Jason's like, well, if that's what I said then yeah, that's what I told them. But you would think you'd remember that call to some extent. You know, you remembered it in February of 2008 when you told the police. And maybe since, several years have passed, I think by the time Xander Sherman interviewed Jason, at least 10 years had passed. So several years have passed. And, your recollection of that morning might not be so clear, but you'd remember if you spoke to somebody like that, especially considering what's going to happen to Lindsay in the aftermath of that same exact day. So Xander Sherman followed up, asking Jason if he remembered it differently now. Like, do you remember the call differently? Was something said, etc.? And Jason replied, quote, "So they're saying that I spoke to the lady, or that I spoke to, the Mexican lady?" End quote. No, Jason. No, Jason, you're saying you spoke to her, and the police wrote that down in their reports. So they're not saying it. I guess they're saying it in the report because that's what you said. Xander told Jason, "I'm reading directly from a summary of the interview that you gave to the police after Lindsay was murdered, where you say you spoke to the female client on Saturday, February 2nd. And Jason said, quote, "I think that's true, yeah," end quote. Xander Sherman asked Jason if there was anything else he could remember from that call. Jason said it was a decade ago. He can't remember, but he may have taken down a message, and that's that. Well, who was this person who called? Did anybody even call the condo that morning? And if they did, what number did they call from? The police won't really release any police records. They certainly won't release any call detail records from anybody's phone involved in this. So we won't know if that's an accurate statement. But on Saturday, February 2nd, before Lindsay's appointments with her clients, she and Jason planned to have a late lunch at a restaurant called Sauce. But before that, Lindsay stopped in at the RE/MAX office that she worked at shortly after 2 p.m. Now, Shirley Zalo has stated that around 2 p.m., Lindsay did call her from the Chatterton RE/MAX branch. And this was the last conversation that Shirley would ever have with Lindsay. And Shirley was asked, well, did you talk about anything during this call that had to do with her appointment that day? And Shirley said no. Lindsay had some questions for Shirley that were not related to her client appointment that day. Now remember, both Jason and Shirley have claimed that Lindsay had talked to them about this appointment before, but she had never expressed fear or concern or feeling unsafe about it. But apparently, Lindsay did express all of these things to some of her coworkers at the RE/MAX office when she was there on the afternoon of February 2nd. The receptionist reported that Lindsay was nervous and she was freaked out about the 5:30 p.m. showing of the D'Souza Place home. And Cal Faber, another realtor, remembered Lindsay talking to himself and a few other people in the upstairs communal workspace about the appointment as well. Cal Faber said, quote, "She said that she had gotten a call from these clients that were on the mainland excited to look at a new property. On one side of it, she was excited because it would mean a big commission for her. On the other side, she was concerned because she didn't know who these people were and wasn't sure if she should meet with them or what she should do." End quote. So Lindsay started talking to her coworkers about the criteria the buyer had listed for the house, and Cal, who had worked as an RCMP officer before his career in real estate, he claimed that he personally saw some red flags. Cal said, quote, "We were all just like, it doesn't sound right. I said, I'm a former RCMP officer. I'm happy to come with you to be present from a safety standpoint. I said that right in front of everybody, and I wasn't the only one that offered that. Other people offered too because it just sounded suspicious." End quote. Now, at that time, Lindsay told her concerned coworkers that her boyfriend, Jason, was going to go with her and that there was no way she would show up to the appointment if Jason wouldn't be there. Cal Faber reported, quote, "She said I wouldn't go there by myself. She said that." End quote. Cal also said that Lindsay told them that Jason was going to follow her and meet her at the property. Now, Cal has been very firm on this since day one. Lindsay was confident that her boyfriend Jason was meeting her at the house so that she would not be alone during the showing, and this was said to Cal and others on February 2nd before Lindsay had lunch with Jason Zalo. Remember that as of now, we know that Lindsay's clients were a husband and wife, and allegedly they were both meeting her at the house. But as far as we know, Lindsay had only ever talked to the wife. I found an article in The Province, which was published on February 5th, 2008. And in that article, an unnamed coworker of Lindsay's, who was also at the RE/MAX office that Saturday afternoon when she got there, they reported Lindsay had also spoken to the husband. Quote, "The woman asked to see properties in the $1 million price range in quiet neighborhoods and had to buy in a day. The second call was from a man. That made her uncomfortable because he wanted to meet her alone. He said his wife couldn't meet her there. I heard she was uncomfortable with the whole thing because it was so out of the blue. The call was on her cell phone. Hey, we're coming to town and we want to buy $1 million house. I heard other people in the office warned her that it was a bit weird. Someone said to her, that's a little strange." End quote. That brings us back to Jason Zalo's statement to the police about a conversation he and Lindsay had on Thursday night, January 31st. Jason claimed that Lindsay had told him that she'd spoken to the female client again, and Lindsay told Jason that the woman was coming on Saturday for sure, but the husband may or may not be coming. In the Capital Daily podcast, Xander Sherman mentions that local news sources reported that Lindsay had supposedly talked to two people. She talked to the husband and the wife, and when she talked to the husband, he told her he would be coming alone, but in the police files supplied to Xander Sherman and Capital Daily, he found no mention of a conversation with the man included in Jason Zalo's police interview. Xander said since the media source was unnamed, it was difficult for him to confirm that Lindsay had actually said this. So I emailed Cal Faber, who we know was also at the RE/MAX office on February 2nd, and I asked him if he remembered Lindsay saying this to him or to someone else while he was present. I asked him if Lindsay mentioned getting 2 phone calls, one from a man and one from a woman. And Cal replied back pretty quickly to me, thank you, Cal, and he said, quote, "I remember her discussing her concerns while we were all upstairs in the common work area. She in fact said what you described, 2 calls, one from a guy and one from a girl. She was concerned, but even after being offered to come along, even for myself, she said her boyfriend was going to meet her there. That's about it." End quote. So in 2026, Cal Faber is still telling me, as he has always maintained, that Lindsay told him, "I would not go alone. My boyfriend is meeting me there. My boyfriend's going to be with me." So not only do we have Cal Faber once again repeating that Lindsay said her boyfriend was going to be there, we also have confirmation that Lindsay at least talked about speaking to both the woman and the man involved in the mystery client couple. And I find it very strange that there is no mention of this in the police files. And I find it strange that it was pretty easy for me to follow up with Cal and ask if he recalled Lindsay discussing 2 calls with the man and the woman, but it doesn't seem law enforcement did this. Now, I'm sure the police interviewed Lindsay's coworkers, especially the ones she talked to the day that she died. So I actually followed up with Cal in email and I asked him, hey, did the police ever talk to you after Lindsay's murder? I said, did they ask you about her statements made on February 2nd? Did they ask you if she had talked about speaking to both the woman and the man? And Cal responded back, I was interviewed very briefly, much later after. Okay. And then I said, thanks, Cal. Did they ask you about whether or not you knew anything of the 2 phone calls Lindsay had mentioned or the phone calls she'd gotten? And he said, I don't remember, was a 10-minute conversation over the phone. This is interesting to me because as we're going to find out, the police say they extensively investigated this Lindsay Buziak's murder. They questioned people. They were questioning everybody. But you didn't, in the days after Lindsay was murdered, question her coworkers who worked in the same RE/MAX office as she did, who she talked to hours before her murder, who she expressed to that she was concerned about going to this viewing by herself. Now, it does look like the police also spoke to the receptionist, because remember, the receptionist said that Lindsay was freaked out. But I don't know when they spoke to the receptionist. But we know that they only spoke to Cal much later, as he says, and not even in person. It was a 10-minute call over the phone. So that's interesting to me. So after getting access to court documents, Capital Daily put out the podcast that we're talking about, the one Xander Sherman worked on, and they also wrote an article called The Case the Internet Got Wrong. And aside from the early police interviews with Jason Zalo, some of the most interesting information they got from the police files were details about the phone that this mystery client used to contact Lindsay Buziak. We found out that 35 ITOs were issued during this investigation. ITO stands for Information to Obtain, and an ITO is a sworn legal document prepared by the police when they want permission from a judge to basically intrude on someone's privacy during a criminal investigation. So without an ITO, the police can't legally track phones, they can't obtain cell phone records, they can't search devices, monitor communications, access private digital data, or even conduct certain types of surveillance. So some of the ITOs requested in Lindsay's case were production orders for companies like Facebook and cellular phone companies. Now, according to the police, there were 11 instances in which Lindsay's BlackBerry dialed or received a call from the phone that her mystery clients used, which the Saanich Police Department have taken to calling the crime phone. That's what they've nicknamed it, the crime phone. Now, of course, law enforcement redacted the dates and the times these calls took place. Why? Why have they done that? Why would that information compromise an investigation that at this point, almost 2 decades later, isn't even happening anymore? The police have not told us when the first phone call between Lindsay and these mystery clients happened or when the last call happened, but the records did reveal that after the first communication from that phone, Lindsay assigned the number a contact name in her phone, $1 million, probably because they said that their budget was $1 million. So as we go through this case, we're going to talk more about this phone and what police found out about it. But right now, it's important to note that Lindsay spoke to these people, whether it was one or both, I don't know, 11 times before meeting with them on February 2nd, 2008. But according to eyewitnesses, she only mentioned speaking to them twice, or at least only talked about 2 specific phone calls. So after leaving the RE/MAX office, Lindsay headed over to Sauce Restaurant where she was meeting Jason for what he has described as a late lunch. It seems they got there a little after 3 p.m., and Jason said Lindsay was in a hurry and she ate quickly because she wanted to go home and I think shower and change before the appointment at 5:30. Jason would later tell the police that during the lunch, he repeated his offer to show the house for Lindsay so that she could go to the bachelorette party. She said no, and then she showed him a couple of the feature sheets for the homes she was considering showing her clients. So keep in mind, allegedly the house on D'Souza Place was not the only house that Lindsay was showing these mystery clients that night. She had a few set up. In his interview with Xander Sherman, Jason said, quote, "There were 3 or 4 or 5 feature sheets that she showed me at Sauce, thinking I'm going to show, all these properties and hoping they would write an offer. So I think that's why she didn't cancel. Not in my knowledge, did she cancel. Her trip was kind of up in the air, like, see how the day goes, right?" End quote. So when he's talking about canceling, Jason's referring to Lindsay going to the bachelorette party. And a feature sheet, by the way, is just a property sheet that lists details of the property for sale. So she's showing him the houses, the addresses that she's going to show this couple. Now, Jason and Shirley Zalo keep saying that they kept offering to Lindsay to show the house for her so she could go to the bachelorette party. But we heard Lindsay's friend, Andrea, say Lindsay was planning to come to my birthday party that same night. Saturday, February 2nd. So is it likely that Lindsay thought she was going to be able to make it to a ferry and get off of Vancouver Island and get to Vancouver and get downtown and be at the bachelorette party early enough or on time when she had the house showing at 5:30? I also talked to Lindsay's father, Jeff Buziak, and he said that the police confirmed with him that there was no overnight bag or anything in Lindsay's car. Which would mean, if she's going to take a ferry to Vancouver from Vancouver Island and she's going to a bachelorette party where you're going to be up all night drinking, you would probably stay the night on the mainland and then take the ferry back the next morning or the next afternoon, whatever, to, get back to your life and your home. but there was no overnight bag. She hadn't packed any clothes, nothing like that. So it really doesn't seem that Lindsay was ever planning, since she made this appointment to show the houses, she was ever planning to go to the bachelorette party. It was more likely she was going to her friend Andrea's birthday party. But yet, Jason and Shirley keep saying that, Lindsay was really kind of trying to make both things happen. She hoped she could show the house to the clients, get an offer in, go to the bachelorette party, and they were offering to help her. And she kept saying, no, she could do it. She could do it all. So Jason paid the bill at Sauce, the restaurant, at 4:24 p.m. He and Lindsay left in their respective vehicles so she could change. And then Jason headed over to SHC Auto Graphics. This is an auto body shop whose owners were clients of his. Now, during his interview with Xander Sherman, Jason said the reason he was there at SHC was, quote, I had a client at SHC, and Lindsay actually had a client buying their condo. I went to SHC to present the new offer from Lindsay's client, end quote. At that time, the owners of SHC Auto Graphics were brothers Joe and John Semren. Now, looking through real estate sales, we find that there are, as far as I know, that are, kind of relevant right now. There's 2 properties associated with the Semren brothers that Jason Zalo or somebody in the Zalo family had a connection to. Now, one was a condo located at 2710 Gross Venner Road, which was listed on January 19th, 2008. So the month before Lindsay died. The listing realtor on this property was Jason Zalo and Shirley Zalo, and the selling agent was Jason's brother, Ryan Zalo. Another townhouse located at 2747 Quadra Street was being sold by a woman named Nada Azori, who at that time was John Semren's fiance. So Jason could have been referring to this listing, but there's an issue with that. According to the records, that property on Grosvenor Road, the sale was already done and set and put through by January 30th of 2008. So, a week or so before Lindsay died. Now, looking through real estate sales, I could find 2 properties associated with the Semren brothers that Jason Zalo or the Zalo family had a connection to. One was a condo located at 2710 Grosvenor Road. This was listed on January 19th, 2008, but it looks like the sale of that condo had already gone through by January 30th, 2008, which was about a week before Lindsay died. Now, the listing realtor on this property was Jason Zalo and his mother, Shirley Zalo, and the selling agent was Ryan Zalo, Jason's brother. We have another townhouse located at 2747 Quadra Street. This was being sold by a woman named Nada Azori, who at that time was John Semren's fiancée. So if Jason can't be referring to the Grosvenor Road property because the sale's already gone through and completed by the time Lindsay died, he could be referring to this Quadra Street townhouse. He could be referring to this listing, but there's an issue with that. The listing agents on this property were Jason Zalo and his mother, Shirley, and the selling agent is also listed as Jason Zalo. But this property itself, this townhouse on Quadra Street, wasn't even listed until February 4th, 2008, which would be 2 days after Lindsay died. 2 days after Lindsay was murdered. So I don't really understand how Jason could be referring to this townhouse, saying that some of Lindsay's clients were buying it and his clients, the Semren brothers or John Semren's fiance, were selling it. And so he had to bring papers there to them to sign. There's a couple things to think about here. First of all, an offer cannot legally be presented on a property that's not even listed, and the contract for the sale of this property was not submitted to the real estate board until February 6th. So since this was Jason's reason for going to SHC Auto Graphics that day, which put him away from Lindsay and the D'Souza Place property, there should be more clarification and transparency about the alleged transaction. Was this the townhouse that apparently John or Joe Semren or somebody related to them was selling? If not, what property was that? Were these the papers that Jason brought over there that day? That was his reason for being there. Because remember, Lindsay told her coworkers at RE/MAX, my boyfriend Jason's going to follow me over. But now this is giving Jason a reason to not immediately follow Lindsay over to the D'Souza Place property because he's got to drop some papers off or present an offer for the Semron brothers at SHC Autographics for them to sign because Lindsay's client is buying their townhouse. Where is this offer that Lindsay's clients made that Jason was presenting to John Semron that day, even though the seller was John's fiance, Nada, and not him? And I assume that Nada would have to be present as well to look at the offer, accept it, or counter it. Was Nada present at SHC on February 2nd? These are all legitimate questions the Saanich police should have asked Jason, questions I hope they did ask him. But from the reports that we have, from the material we have that was released, it doesn't appear that they did. And they should have also verified with other sources, such as the Semron brothers and Nada Azori. We need to know more. We know that Jason Zalo was at SHC Autographics that night, and even though the police have not released his time of arrival, they did disclose that he was seen leaving the parking lot in his 2005 Range Rover at 5:30 p.m., and they determined this from surveillance cameras. Now, Jason was allegedly alone when he arrived, but he was not alone when he left, and that's where Cohen Oatman enters the picture. Cohen Oatman was a member of Jason's friend group, like a kind of periphery member. They also worked together at Terry Martin's Mortgage Center, having both started there in November of 2007, and they also played hockey together in the same league. Jason played for the Oilers hockey team, Cohen played for the Stingers, and the night before, their teams had played against each other. That night, Saturday, February 2nd, Cohen had another game at the Perks Arena, which started, I think, at 10 or 10:10 p.m. Now, Jason told Xander Sherman that while he was at SHC, he got a call from Cohen Oatman, who told Jason that he could meet him at SHC. Allegedly, the plan was for Jason and Cohen to have dinner together that night. And who wanted to plan this dinner? Whose idea was it for the dinner to happen? Allegedly, it was Jason, because Cohen Oatman had told his wife, like, oh, Jason wants to have dinner tonight, but I have a game at 10 and I'm kind of, I have to work during the day and I kind of just want to come home and chill before going to the hockey game. I don't really want to go out and have dinner and then go to the hockey game. And I guess his wife was like, oh, just go. He's your friend. Go have dinner with him. And so Cohen ended up agreeing to this dinner that would take place on the evening of Saturday, February 2nd. Now, for some reason, when Cohen called Jason, and Jason was at SHC, Cohen said his cell phone had died. He was downtown and he was calling Jason from a payphone. So when Cohen called from this payphone, Jason obviously said, hey, I'm at SHC Autographics, so, come and meet me here, and then we'll go to dinner from there. Something that's always bothered me is what was the reason for this dinner between Jason and Cohen? If Jason and Lindsay had had a late lunch together that ended, a little bit after 4 p.m., why is Jason wanting to have dinner with Cohen before the hockey game? Why would he be hungry at that point yet? Maybe they plan to have dinner, several hours later, around 7 or 8 even. But if that's the case, why is Cohen meeting you at SHC, around that 5:15, 5:30 time if you're just going to go to a restaurant later? Why wouldn't you have him meet you at whatever restaurant you want to go to? I don't know. But apparently Jason was hungry again after his late lunch and he wanted to go to dinner with Cohen Oatman. Jason Zalo, in February of 2008, told the police that after his friend Cohen arrived at SHC, Jason got a call from Lindsay, and he told her he was still with his clients, the Semron brothers, and he would call her back when he was finished with his clients. Jason also told the police that when he did call Lindsay back, she was driving over to the D'Souza Place house, and this is when Jason asked her if she wanted him to meet her at the house. In the podcast, Xander Sherman says, quote, in the documents, the police documents, this is the first clear mention I can find that Lindsay wanted him to meet her at the house. Jason says it was a spur-of-the-moment decision, end quote. Xander then asked Jason on the podcast, quote, and it sounds like the plan for you to be at the house was conceived spontaneously in this very moment. Is that right? End quote. To which Jason responds, quote, yes, it was. Yeah. End quote. I have a problem with this claim because once again, according to Lindsay's coworkers, she had told them earlier that her boyfriend was absolutely going to the house with her. He was following her over and she would not meet with the clients unless he was there. Jason appears to have told the police and Xander Sherman that it was not decided that he would go to the house until the very last minute as Lindsay was driving to the D'Souza Place house. And after all, this makes sense because he'd already made dinner plans with someone else that night, right? Dinner plans that were scheduled just a few hours after a late lunch. He had literally just eaten with Lindsay, but whatever. So, obviously, if Jason had made dinner plans, he can support his previous statements that Lindsay had not asked him to come with her to the house and that it was very last minute that she decided he wanted him to go and meet her at the house. Now, he doesn't say why she said she wanted him to meet her at the house. In the Dateline episode, one of the police officers, Detective Horsley, we're going to talk about him a lot, he said that Jason had some papers for Lindsay to sign. There were no papers for Lindsay to sign. What were these papers that Lindsay had to sign? Was it part of the mysterious phantom offer that he was presenting to the Summerin brothers from Lindsay's clients? What would Lindsay have had to have signed? It doesn't make any sense. There were no papers, and Jason never mentions to Xander Sherman or to the police in 2008 that there was papers he had for Lindsay to sign, although Detective Horsley says this in the Dateline episode on Lindsay's case, which aired in 2010. It doesn't make any sense. So according to the police, Cohen Oatman left his car at SHC, and then he got into Jason's Range Rover, and surveillance video from an upstairs business captured them leaving the parking lot at 5:30 p.m., 1 minute after the lockbox at the D'Souza Place property was accessed. This is very important. So when I say lockbox, I'm talking about it's a small secure container. It holds the keys to the property so that these real estate agents can access homes for showings without the seller being present. They don't want the seller present. We will find out, actually, that the seller, Joe D'Souza, was present at the home just a half an hour before Lindsay got there, but we'll put a pin in that for now and come back to it. So the lockbox is usually going to be attached to the doorknob or handle of the door. It's only accessible to agents with the code or electronic authorization. And there's two parts of this lockbox. The outer locked part that's usually weatherproof and tamper resistant, and then a small inner compartment. In my experience, it's usually like rubber, and this inner compartment holds the physical house keys. Now, the following timeline's important. It's complicated. Let's go through it carefully. I repeat that in February of 2008, Jason Zalo told the police that when he called Lindsay back, after he finished with his clients, she told him she was driving to the house. And this is when Jason decided he would drive over and meet her there because this is when she asked him to. Let's fast forward to October of 2010 when Jason appeared on the Dateline episode covering Lindsay's case. The episode does not say that Jason went over to the D'Souza Place house because Lindsay had asked him to. It says he was going over there to drop off some papers, because that's what the Sandwich police told Dateline. In the episode, Jason makes it seem as if he called Lindsay on his way out of SHC as he was walking to his vehicle in the parking lot, right? There's really no other time he could have done it. He was finished with the clients, so he would be leaving. Either he called her while he was still in the building walking out, or he called her when he was in the parking lot walking to his Range Rover. That would put the timing of this call at around 5:29 p.m. because you're leaving. Jason says in the Dateline episode that at this point when he called Lindsay, which I think would be around 5:29, he said, quote, "So I said, I'll come meet you. I'll be 10, 15 minutes or so." And I started driving, and that's when she said to me, "Okay, I'll see you in a bit. I gotta go. The Mexicans are here." End quote. Jason told the police that the address of the D'Souza Place house didn't come up in his truck's navigation system because the housing development was so new. So he then called Lindsay back for directions to the house. So in the podcast with Xander Sherman, Jason said, quote, "I didn't know where D'Souza Place is, and I don't think it was on my truck nav because it was a new subdivision. So when it didn't pop up, I remember calling, asking where to go, where the house is, and she was telling me the directions." End quote. This is the call during which Jason claims Lindsay told him she had to go because the clients were there. Jason told the police in 2008 that he told Lindsay to text him the address, which she did. Okay, so let's go over this really quick. Jason's walking out of SHC. He calls Lindsay back because she called him when he was still with the clients. He said, "I'm done with the clients. I'm on my way. I'll see you in 10, 15 minutes. He says on Dateline, and then I got in my truck and I started driving. Makes it sound like he's walking to his truck, right? And then he starts driving, but it's not until after he starts driving where he puts the address of the D'Souza Place house into his navigation system and realizes that it's not in there. It's not picking up on it. Normally, if I'm going someplace, I'm going to put the address into my navigation system or my Google Maps or whatever before I even move, before I start driving, right? Because how would he even know which way to go? How would he know which way to even turn out of the parking lot if you don't know where the house is? But let's say Jason wasn't super responsible and it was kind of a last minute thing, and he's got Cohen Oatman in the passenger seat and he's like, hey, Cohen, put the address in there. Let's see where we're going. When he figures out the address doesn't work, he then calls Lindsay back and she answers and she's giving him directions. And then she says, hey, I got to go. The clients are here, right? And then he tells her, text me the directions. And according to Jason, she does. So this is a lot happening. This is a lot happening of you not knowing where to go while you're driving for a couple of minutes. Now, police have confirmed that Lindsay's phone did communicate with Jason while she was at the D'Souza Place house, allegedly while she was there with the clients. According to the police, 2 independent witnesses near the D'Souza Place home saw Lindsay and a couple outside of the house that night at approximately 5:30 p.m. These 2 independent witnesses was a man driving home from work and a woman walking her dog. Reportedly, they saw a couple walk into the cul-de-sac at this time, and they saw Lindsay greet the couple by the back of her car in the driveway. According to Jason, a text back from Lindsay with the directions came shortly before a text he sent her, which said, quote, just a couple of minutes away, end quote. That text that Jason sent Lindsay happened at 5:38 p.m. It was never opened, and police detectives confirm this was the last text Jason sent to Lindsay. Horsley says that in the Dateline episode. He says 5:38 p.m., last text. We also have reports that Jason called his brother Ryan probably around 5:35 p.m., and Jason asked Ryan for directions to the D'Souza Place house. This report comes from the mother of a young woman that Ryan was picking up for dinner that night. In an email to Lindsay's father, Jeff, this woman wrote, quote, Ryan came to our house the night Lindsay was murdered to take Ashley out for dinner. I had my sister and her husband for dinner. He got a call from Jason for directions. Didn't make sense to us. Then Shirley called. Then he couldn't get a hold of Jason, so they went to D'Souza, end quote. So I talked to Jeff Buziak about this woman who says Ryan Zalo was picking up her daughter Ashley for a date. And she said while Ryan was there, he got this call from Jason asking for directions. And this woman told Jeff it was really weird because Ryan was making, like, I guess, a big show of sort of talking loudly and being like, oh, you need directions? Oh, yeah, it's like 5:35 p.m. right now, like kind of yelling out the time, yelling out that Jason needed directions. And the family whose house he was in, they were like, this is weird. Why is he being so extra about this? Why is he being so loud? Like, why is he having this whole conversation and giving these directions, but kind of yelling out prompts like, you need directions? Oh, it's currently 5:35, just this weird thing. Now, according to the internet, SHC Autographics was 17 miles from the D'Souza Place house, and it would take about, 17 minutes to drive there. Now, we can shave off a few minutes if you're driving a little faster than the speed limit, but to be fair, let's say that it would take about 15 minutes for Jason to drive from SHC Graphics to the D'Souza Place home. Jason said on Dateline that when he talked to Lindsay before he had pulled out of the parking lot, he told her he would be there in 10 or 15 minutes. But also, according to Jason, he didn't know where the D'Souza Place house was, and he hadn't gotten the address from Lindsay yet, so how would he know how long it would take for him to drive there, right? We can say he was just estimating, and he just happened to get lucky and kind of be close to the time it would take to drive to the house. But also, according to Jason, after pulling out of SHC, he realized his GPS wasn't going to give him directions, and this is when he called Lindsay and asked her to text him the directions. Her response text did not come until shortly before his last text to her at 5:38, so let's say Lindsay sent the text to Jason with the directions between 5:36 and 5:38 p.m. It would explain why Jason called his brother Ryan for directions around 5:35 p.m. because he hadn't heard back from Lindsay yet with the directions. But once again, which way did he turn out of the SHC parking lot if he had no idea where he was going? Which direction did he drive for several minutes before getting the directions either from Ryan or Lindsay? If he'd been driving aimlessly or he had taken a wrong turn, it would probably increase the time it would take for him to get to the D'Souza Place house, and he wouldn't have texted Lindsay at 5:38 and said he was just a few minutes away, only 8 minutes after he had left the SHC parking lot, right? Especially if you'd gotten the directions by then, which I assume you did because she had sent them or you got them from Ryan. Why would you say you're only a few minutes away? But you just left SHC 8 minutes prior, so you're not only a few minutes away. Let's go back to the 5:29, 5:30 time period. In one statement to the police, Jason called Lindsay on his way out of SHC, and she said she was driving to the house. But then he also told the police that when he called her and asked her for directions, after he pulled out of the parking lot at 5:30, she told him she had to go because her clients were there. We know that Lindsay accessed the lockbox on the house at 5:29 p.m., meaning that before 5:30 p.m., Lindsay was already at the D'Souza Place house. So she couldn't have been driving as Jason was walking out of SHC and to his Range Rover. She couldn't have been. She was already there. She was accessing the lockbox at 5:29. Jason left SHC at 5:30 per surveillance. This is a pretty cemented time. This is not a time that's up for debate. He left at 5:30. Additionally, the two independent witnesses, who we will talk more about later, they claim they saw Lindsay outside with the two clients at approximately 5:30 p.m. This lines up with the timeline of Lindsay opening the lockbox at 5:29, and as she was doing that, her clients approached. They spent a little bit of time outside making introductions, which made it possible for the two witnesses to see Lindsay and the couple in the driveway. So if Jason called Lindsay after he left SHC at 5:30 to ask for directions, it would have put the client getting to the house in the minutes after 5:30. Something about those few minutes in Jason's drive from SHC to D'Souza Place doesn't mesh or sit right with me. It doesn't. Both the Dateline episode and Jason himself put his arrival to the D'Souza Place house at 5:45 p.m., which once again, if he didn't even know where he was going when he left SHC, and it was a calculated 17-minute drive, that doesn't really add up either. According to the police, minutes before that, at 5:41 p.m., an outgoing call to a number that they haven't disclosed was made from Lindsay's BlackBerry. Detectives say that this was a pocket dial that was made as a result of the attack on Lindsay, and during the attack, the buttons of her BlackBerry, which was in her pocket, were inadvertently pressed, and a call was made out. Police believe Lindsay Buziak was murdered in the 3-minute time gap between 5:38 and 5:41 p.m. And I don't know how they used 5:38 as a starting point for that time period, because as far as we know, the only thing that happened at that time was Jason's text to Lindsay that he was only a few minutes away, even though he was still 7 minutes away given his arrival time when that text was sent, if his arrival time to the house was 5:45 p.m. But anyways, we know that the police say Lindsay never read this message that was sent at 5:38 p.m. So how do they know she wasn't attacked before the message was sent? Or do they think the killers somehow saw the message, knew that Jason was on his way, only a few minutes away, and they knew they had to strike now or they would lose their chance? That's kind of what I'm thinking. Or was the text to Lindsay saying, I'm just a few minutes away, actually a message to whoever was in that house with Lindsay to let them know that Jason had already left and was headed over to the house? And when I say, was this a message meant for Lindsay's killers, I am in fact wondering, yes, if Jason was involved in some way, was he trying to warn them so they had time to do what they needed to do and get out? Was he trying to tell them, I'm a few minutes away, even though he was still 7 minutes away? And had it been sort of previously understood that when the text came through saying just a few minutes away, they would know, they had more than a few minutes, but they needed to get going and get out of there. That's just my speculation, my opinion, my questions, allegedly. Don't come for me. All right, so let's talk about what happened once Jason Zalo and Cohen Open arrived to the D'Souza Place house. In 2010, when he appeared on Dateline, Jason said that as he drove past the house, he saw something through the front door. He said, quote, "It's like kind of smoked glass, and I saw a few people in the front entranceway," end quote. Jason clarifies that he saw the outlines of what he believes to be two figures through the glass. Jason then says that he didn't want to appear to be the meddling boyfriend, so he pulled out of the cul-de-sac and out onto the main road to wait. Okay, the main road that he's talking about would be Torquay Drive. Remember, Joe D'Souza, his parents initially had their first homestead, their first property on Torquay Drive, and then he took that property and made it into the subdivision or the cul-de-sac of D'Souza Place. So Jason says he drives past the house. He sees two figures through the frosted glass. He doesn't want to be a meddling boyfriend, so he keeps driving because it's a cul-de-sac, so it's a circle. He keeps driving around, and then he pulls out onto the main road of Torquay Drive, and he waits. And this is where he and Cohen Open remained for about 10 minutes until he got a feeling that something was wrong. So he texted Lindsay. Yes, you heard right. On Dateline in 2010, Jason Zalo says that he texted Lindsay at that point, "Are you okay?" After being by the house for about 10 minutes, putting this alleged text happening around 5:55 p.m. But remember, the police said in that same Dateline episode that the last text Jason sent to Lindsay was his 5:38 p.m. text where he told her he was just a few minutes away. In fact, it is Detective Sergeant Chris Horsley who said this 5:38 p.m. text was the last text that Jason sent Lindsay. He says this in the Dateline episode. So is the last text that Jason sent Lindsay, is that happening at 5:38? Or is it happening after he's been sitting outside the D'Souza Place house for 10 minutes? In the Dateline episode, Jason says, quote, when I texted her, are you okay? And I didn't get a text back. That's what really worried me, end quote. This worry apparently prompted Jason to walk to the front door of the house, and he said that through the front door, he could see Lindsay's shoes lying in the foyer. But when he checked the door, he found out that it was locked. He says he called 911 at 6:05 p.m. and he told them his girlfriend was inside a house showing it. The house was locked and he couldn't get in. Jason said, quote, in a panic mode, I just told them the address to the house and, I'm going to get in the house or break in the house or something like that to open it up, end quote. This is when Jason claims he gave his friend Cohen Oatman a boost over a fence that was around the back patio of the house. Cohen then found an open side door, and then Cohen went around to the front door to let Jason in. Jason entered the home. He found Lindsay's body in an upstairs bedroom. She'd been stabbed multiple times in her head and upper body. He said, quote, she was just lying on her back, not moving, nothing. So I went straight to her, tried to give her CPR. I felt her skin. It was, she was already passed away, end quote. Now, I remember first seeing this Dateline episode and finding Jason's demeanor and wording here to be very odd and important. It is my opinion that Jason was going to say, I felt her skin and it was cold. And then he decided against saying that and instead pivoted to, she was already passed away. If my theory is true, the reason Jason decided to not make the claim and follow through saying her skin was cold to the touch was because scientifically that would have been impossible. Jason had said that once he found Lindsay, he yelled to Cohen Oatman to call 911 and another 911 call was placed from the house. The Dateline episode claims this call was placed at 6:11 p.m. Other sources say the second 911 call came in at 6:15 p.m. Either way, for this calculation, the exact timing doesn't matter because if Lindsay Buziak was attacked and died roughly between 5:38 and 5:41 p.m., as the police have claimed, her skin would not have been cold or cool to the touch by 6:11 or 6:15 p.m. By this time, Lindsay's core temperature would actually still be pretty close to normal, and even with significant blood loss, which can somewhat accelerate cooling, the change would not be that dramatic within the space of 30 minutes. Now, this could have been Jason just realizing his choice of words was not accurate. It could have been him being emotionally affected by the memory of what he was now having to relive and describe, like an emotional pullback. I'm not saying that he's lying or hiding anything. I just found it interesting. I wanted to share. I also want to clarify something. In the Dateline episode, Jason never mentions that he was with anyone. He does not ever talk about Cohen Oatman, and although in statements to the police, Jason said Cohen was the one who called 911, in the Dateline episode, Jason makes it seem like he was on the phone with 911 because he's the only person there. He said he remembered the police were on the phone and he kept yelling at them to hurry up, even though he knew that Lindsay was already gone. So when Jason talked to Xander Sherman for the podcast, he was walked through the statements he had made to the police in February of 2008. And they do differ from what Jason said on Dateline quite a bit. Jason told the police that when he and Cohen arrived to the house, he had turned off the main road of Torquay onto D'Souza Place, and as he turned onto D'Souza Place, he saw a man enter the open front door of the house and close the door. Jason told the police that he believed the man had heard his truck approaching, and that was when the man decided to go back into the house through the already open door. So it's a circle, right? The D'Souza Place house is here, and Torquay Drive is here, and I guess Jason sort of pulled in here, so he'd have to go around and then pass the D'Souza Place house where Lindsay and the clients were before he turned back onto Torquay again. And he's saying that when he pulled in here, and the house is here, he saw the man walking out, and he was leaving the house, but then he turned around and went back inside because he heard Jason's truck or saw Jason's truck, and then the door was still open when the man was leaving, so he just went back through that open door and then closed it. Now, Jason claimed that he didn't get a good look at the man, he didn't see his face, he only saw his back, and he described the coat the man was wearing as being brown in color, but not one solid color of brown, and it was classy, and it likely hung right below the man's waist. Xander Sherman asked if that description was still accurate, and if Jason could remember anything else about the man, and Jason said that 10 years later he could not remember the exact description he had given the police, and he doesn't remember anything else about the man's physical description. Xander asked Jason, "Did you think the man was on his way out of the house after hearing your truck, but when he heard the truck, he went back inside and locked the door so that you couldn't get in?" Jason told Xander Sherman, quote, "Well, that's kind of the part that's when I kind of got, I don't want to say panic, but I started to panic because that's not normal," end quote. Xander then told Jason that people have wondered why Jason didn't go right in at that point, especially if you're saying you felt like something wasn't right. And Jason claimed it was because Lindsay had expressed to him that she didn't want it to be obvious that he was there. He said, quote, "So I remember pulling up, not in front of the house, because of course, that is what Lindsay did not want me to do. We sat there for a few minutes, whatever it was, and I remember texting her a few times. I don't think I called, I think I just texted because she was in a showing," end quote. So in 2010, we have Jason saying on Dateline that he texted Lindsay after he got to the house. And now we again have Jason claiming to Xander Sherman that he sent Lindsay some texts, which the police, in my opinion, have already confirmed didn't happen because Detective Horsley said that Jason's last text to Lindsay had been at 5:38 p.m. Now, I don't know if Jason told the police in 2008 that he was texting Lindsay after arriving to the house, or if he's just saying this to Xander as he's thinking back. But if he did tell the police that he texted her when they talked to him in February of 2008, that should have sent off a red flag for them because according to law enforcement, as long as they're being honest and accurate, which I'm not quite sure if that's even true, Jason texting Lindsay once he got to the house, that's not a true statement. That's not. Because Chris Horsley said, last text from Jason to Lindsay, 5:38 p.m. We do know that police sometimes lie or give inaccurate information publicly to the press or just on these shows like this. They do this in order to mislead or draw out the perpetrators. But why would they lie about this, right? Why would they lie about this? What does it matter? If Jason, Lindsay's boyfriend, texted her once he got to the house to make sure she was okay, but you're telling people his last text to her was 5:38 p.m. where he was like, I'm a few minutes away. Why would that be compromising to the investigation? Now, it's important to know, and we're going to talk about this more, within a week after that Dateline episode airing, the Saanich police put out a statement officially clearing the members of the Zalo family, like saying, now, I guess not clearing them, but yeah, clearing them, saying they're not suspects. They've cooperated. They're not suspects. So what would be their motive or reason for giving inaccurate information about Jason's final texting communication with Lindsay if he was not a suspect? And in fact, before the detectives even went on Dateline and filmed their interviews, they had already publicly cleared Jason himself in 2009. They were just now, after the Dateline episode, clearing the whole Zalo family. And I'm going to tell you why I think they did that, just not yet, because it's part of the story progression. But anyways, the version of events Jason gave Dateline in 2010 and the version of events he gave the police in February of 2008 are already quite different. In 2008, Jason did not claim to see the outlines of two figures through the frosted glass of the front door. He claimed to the police in 2008 that he saw a man in a classy brown coat who appeared to be leaving the house and then changed his mind when he heard Jason's truck. Jason claimed that it was seeing the man and his abrupt re-entry to the house that began his worry for Lindsay. But in 2010, Jason said it was when he texted her, "Are you okay?" after 10 minutes, and she didn't respond. That's what made him worry. These two stories are very different. It would be hard to say that in 2008, the night of Jason seeing all of this happening, he remembered seeing a man outside going back in, but then 2 years later in 2010, when he goes on Dateline, he now remembered seeing two figures through the glass of the front door. This is a very different story. So after making sure he pulled his Range Rover up, not in front of the house, because that's what Lindsay didn't want, Jason said he and Cohen sat there for a few minutes and Jason tried to text Lindsay a few times. According to Detective Sergeant Horsley, Jason said that he parked his vehicle on the opposite side of the road from the house, which does not align with Jason's 2010 comments on Dateline, where he said he pulled out of the cul-de-sac and parked on the main road, Torquay, outside of the cul-de-sac. Okay, Jason told the police that once he's pulling up across from the house, they sat in the car on the opposite side of the road from the house for 10 minutes while he texted Lindsay. When she didn't respond, he moved the Range Rover. Jason told Xander, quote, and then we moved the vehicle from one place to another place, more clear, so she could see that I was there, I think. And then again, no calls, no texts, no nothing. So then I just said to Cohen, let's go. Let's just get inside because we were waiting, we were waiting outside for a few minutes, end quote. Once again, according to Horsley, the police detective on the case, Jason first parks outside on the opposite side of the road from the house, and he's there for 10 minutes, and then he moved the Range Rover, and that's when he moved it to Torquay, where he and Cohen waited for another 10 minutes. That's not what Jason said in Dateline in 2010. Jason told Xander that he moved the car so that it would be more clear so that Lindsay could see that he was there. So let's go to, Google Earth, and let's go to the street view of this house located at 1702 De Sousa Place to see if that makes any sense at all. Okay, so this is the De Sousa Place cul-de-sac, and right here, this is Torquay Drive. So this is the address we're focused on right here, 1702 De Sousa Place. Now, according to Jason, when he and Cohen arrived, they pulled into the cul-de-sac and drove around it, passing the house right here, which is when Jason saw the man going back into the house. He then pulled around in a circle and parked on the other side of the street across from the house, which would be, I believe, right here. So after not hearing from Lindsay, even through repeated texts, Jason and Cohen drove around in a circle again, past the house again, and then turned right onto Torquay, where they parked right here. And that's consistent with what Jason told Dateline, although the entire details are not consistent. Now, let me ask you this. Based on the fact that the front door of the house is located here, where would it have been more evident to Lindsay that Jason was there? Would it have been more evident to her if he was parked here, right across from the house and across from the front door of the house, or if he was parked here on the main road located at the side of the house where there's a bunch of trees and a pretty tall fence? You can see here a pretty tall fence blocking the view of the street, blocking the view of the house from the street. Where would it be more evident to Lindsay that Jason was there? At around 6 p.m., Jason and Cohen approached the De Sousa Place house. They walked up to the front door. They found it locked. According to police documents, Jason said he rang the doorbell about 10 times and he could see Lindsay's high heels through the glass of the front door. Jason also said that Lindsay had taken a portion of the lockbox inside the house with her. This should not have been a noteworthy detail for Jason, as he was a realtor as well, and it's well known that agents almost always take the key holder inside the house with them. In fact, it is standard safety practice. They do this so that the keys aren't left outside for someone else to grab them. They do this so they can enter the home with the clients and lock the door so that no one else can come in while the showing is happening, and so that they can re-secure the house after the showing and before leaving. Jason says that because Lindsay had taken the keys inside with her, it prevented him from getting inside, which is exactly the whole reason real estate agents do this. Now, Xander Sherman says on the podcast that he spoke to Shirley Zalo, and she told him that Jason had called her at that point so that he could have her call the listing agent to get the access code for the garage. Now, Jason was hoping that he could enter the home that way, but I guess he said the access code didn't work and he couldn't get inside. Jason told Xander Sherman, quote, "It was an incorrect code to go through the garage. I walked down, the garage was right out front, and I remember walking down to the right side, and there's a door around there, a side door, but that was locked also. You just get that sense. There's something wrong. There's something not right. I remember calling 911. I don't know if you have that call," end quote. So this would have been when the first 911 call was made, and Xander Sherman had a written summary of the call that was written by an investigator who had heard the physical 911 call. And this written statement from the investigator says, quote, "Zalo advised that he and his girlfriend were both realtors. His girlfriend was supposed to be meeting a female client from out of town at 1702 De Sousa Place. Zalo stated that his girlfriend had asked him to come and kind of follow her just because she was kind of scared," end quote. What? First of all, we know that Lindsay was meeting two people. She had always said she was meeting two people, that she was meeting a couple. She called them the Mexicans. She didn't say the Mexican. So Jason's now telling the police that Lindsay was only meeting a female client. But what else does he say? If it's true that Jason told a 911 operator that Lindsay had asked him to come and follow her because she was kind of scared, and why would it not be true? Because it's in the police documents, and it was written by a police officer who listened to the 911 call. It makes no sense why in every interview after, whether with police or the media, Jason has insisted that he had received no indication from Lindsay whatsoever, ever, at any time that she was feeling nervous or anxious or scared about the appointment. And remember, in the Dateline episode, we were told that Jason boosted Cohen over the back fence, and then Cohen found a side door that was unlocked. Some sources say the side door was sort of cracked open. And that's what Jason told Xander Sherman of the podcast, that Cohen had discovered a side door that was cracked open, even though in Dateline it says it was just a door that was unlocked. And then he said he may have helped Cohen get over a fence that enclosed the patio. I mean, you either did or you didn't. And this is why it's frustrating with Jason's statements, because I get it. Some time has passed, right, since you have actually been in the situation and something very traumatic happened to you. You found your girlfriend. She's brutally murdered. But, like, did you or did you not boost him over the fence? And if you didn't, how did he get over there? And, like, you probably did, right? You probably helped him or you watched him go over, but you would remember which one you did. Either way, a few days after Lindsay's murder, Jason returned to the D'Souza Place address, and he helped the police by filming a reenactment of how he, like, entered the house once Cohen got in and let him in. A few minutes of that reenactment was released in the media. I'll play it for you now.
Which side of the door was going on when the door opened for you?
Right where you are.
So,
Yeah.
so I'll do that. I'm just, so I know where to. So he opens it like this? Does he open it all the way or you just?
He unlocked the door.
Okay, he unlocks it, yeah. So I unlock it.
Since he unlocked it,
Okay, it's unlocked?
I just opened it.
Okay, so,
So I don't know if his hand, I know that because I heard it unlock. The
Okay.
second he unlocked it, I pushed it open.
okay.
Uh, He was already in front of me
Yeah,
and I said, I'm running upstairs.
okay.
And I was yelling, I'm like, Lindsay, Lindsay, Lindsay.
And where did Cohen go?
He went straight ahead.
He went straight ahead?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
So just hang on a sec there.
yeah,
So he went straight ahead
yeah,
and you went running upstairs?
yeah.
Okay, so let me go upstairs first, and then you can talk your way, go upstairs, and then we'll go to the end, all right? You okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I was running inside the house. I just came running up the stairs.
Do you remember grabbing the banister at all, or?
Down there.
Okay, what else were you doing? Did you see anything? Did you hear anything? Did you smell anything? Kind of put yourself back there into that exact column.
The time I got from the door to upstairs was probably 2 seconds.
Okay, so you're.
Like I was running up the stairs. Yeah. Like I didn't walk. The second I opened the door, I yelled, Lindsay, Lindsay. And then I ran up these stairs as fast as I could.
Okay.
So I ran.
According to Jason, he ran up the steps and he found Lindsay in the master bedroom. This was the first place he looked. Jason told Xander Sherman that he believed Cohen Oatman was searching the first floor of the house and he was already in the kitchen area as Jason began climbing the stairs. In 2021, Jason told news outlet Capital Daily that partway up the stairs, he could already see Lindsay's body slumped against the bedroom wall. However, according to the police records, Lindsay's body was lying in a large pool of blood. This is when Jason told Cohen to call 911 again. In the podcast with Xander Sherman, Jason said, quote, as soon as you walk 3/4 of the way up the stairs, the door goes into the bedroom where Lindsay was laying on the floor, end quote. Jason continued to tell Xander Sherman that he started performing CPR on Lindsay, saying, quote, I didn't roll Lindsay over to look at her back or anything like that. I remember getting to her, yelling for Cohen. He was calling 911, and I was trying to do CPR. And also when I was doing CPR, with the wounds, they punctured her lungs, so it wasn't working because there was, the amount of stab wounds, end quote. Jason told Xander that he could hear air. He'd hear air, as in he was doing CPR, and because of the stab wounds in Lindsay's upper body, he could hear the air that he was blowing into Lindsay's lungs coming back out and escaping, and that there was lots of blood, a lot of stab wounds. So is the supposition that Jason found Lindsay slumped against the bedroom wall and he pulled her into a lying position to perform CPR, or was she already laying on the floor when he found her, as he told Xander Sherman? We know the police records say that Lindsay was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. This is either where she was when her attackers left or where she ended up after her boyfriend Jason moved her body to do CPR before first responders arrived. It would probably be nice if we knew that. It's probably important. I also want to bring your attention back to the comment Jason made on Dateline, that he had touched Lindsay's skin, and at that point he knew she was gone. If that's the case, what was the purpose for doing CPR? And I know, you'll say, well, he wanted to try. He had to at least try. His girlfriend's laying there. There's blood all over. She's stabbed. He has to do something. He has to try. He's a man. Sure, but what was the purpose for interfering with a murder scene? Potentially moving the body of a murder victim before police can arrive and catalog what position she was in to perform a life-saving measure on a person you knew was already dead. That's kind of where I'm at. So you told Dateline that you went in, you touched her, and you knew she was gone because you touched her skin. But then you moved her body. If what you told the police and what you told Capital News is true, that you saw her propped against the wall when you first went up there, and then the police found her laying on her back in a pool of blood, you moved her body to perform CPR, but you already knew she was dead. So you did technically tamper with the crime scene, and it may or may not be important, but I would think the police would want to arrive to find the murder victim as she had been left by her assailants, not as she was moved by her boyfriend who was doing CPR, even though he knew she was already gone. Okay, so this video is already going to be very long, and this is where we're going to stop for today, but we have so much more to talk about. And when we come back in the next video, I'm going to bring you right back here to this point of the story with Jason and Cohen Oatman entering the D'Souza Place house to find Lindsay Buziak stabbed to death and no perpetrators in sight. We're going to pick up right from there. We have a lot to talk about still. I'm going to try to wrap everything up in the next episode. It's not 3 parts, it's only 2. Hopefully we can do that. And yeah, let me know what you think in the comments so far. I know that there are people who think that there's other angles here to pursue. The police certainly think there's other angles to pursue in Lindsay Buziak's murder, although it's been, 2 decades and they haven't done much pursuing and much solving. But there is something about Jason's stories that he's told over the years that don't match up. And what stands out the most is, did you see the back of a man like you told the police in 2008? Or did you see 2 figures through the frosted glass like you told Dateline in 2010? And how could your stories be so different in just a 2-year period? How could they be so different? And then when you're talking to Xander Sherman 10 years after, I think it was like 2019, you told him you saw the back of a man, not 2 figures. So which is it? What's going on? What's happening? I don't know. Why does it not add up? I don't know. Why did you say you didn't want to be a meddling boyfriend? You could have gone to the house and walked up and just made sure she was okay when you got there because, you were already late getting there. If the showing started at 5:30, you could have just gone in and you didn't have to even be Lindsay's boyfriend. You could have just been a mortgage broker, which you were. Jason Zalo was a licensed mortgage broker. So you could have just gone in and said, oh, hey, I'm Jason Zalo. And, Lindsay and I work at the same firm together. And I wanted to meet you guys and offer my mortgage services if you needed it. I know you got to move fast. So I just wanted to introduce myself to you now. Just act like a business associate. You're not a meddling boyfriend at that point. You're her business associate. There's a million different things. And Jason should have been there with Lindsay right from the get. But once again, according to him, it was a last minute thing that Lindsay had said, can you meet me here? But when he calls 911, he said Lindsay wanted him to meet her there because she was scared of the showing that she was doing alone. And she was only meeting with women. So nothing really adds up here, but let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. And I will see you very, very soon. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe. Love you so much. See you soon. Bye.
Straight down.